you so much. I was telling Brooklyn before we got started that I do love the row crop stuff, and that's what my day-to-day stuff is. So it's nice to have cut flowers, which is a treat, and something that I did at an internship while I was still in my undergrad, and do it personally just to have cut flowers at home. So today, just gonna kind of give you a basic guide of cut flowers. Let's see, delay. Okay. So a cutting garden is just a dedicated space where flowers are grown specifically for harvesting and using in bouquets and floral arrangements, rather than being left to bloom solely in the garden, which would be kind of like your perennial plants or something along that line. So our learning objectives, my expectations for what you should get out of today's class is that you should recognize some important things to think about before you start. You'll get an idea of what types of flowers you can plant in your first cutting garden. You'll understanding, some basic ongoing maintenance tasks that is required in a cutting garden, as well as how to care for your blooms pre and post harvest. Um, we'll go over a very basic idea of building a bouquet just to kind of get you a baseline. What you'll not get out of today's class is you'll not be an expert on growing any specific type of flower. You'll not learn everything that it takes to start plants from seeds, bulbs, corms, and all seasons. There's so much variability in the cut flower industry, and how everything is grown. Each one's a little bit different. You'll not learn all the pests and diseases that you will encounter in your cutting garden, and you will not become an expert floral designer. This is really just a basic start, to kind of get you background knowledge to see if you might even, want to be interested in taking this a step further. So starting from the ground up is siting your garden, your cut flower garden. Before you start thinking about what flowers to grow, let's visualize the space that you have in mind and all the environmental requirements. So the majority of cut flowers need full sun, which is 6+ hours of full sun per day. Some flowers can tolerate partial shade like dahlias, but a cutting garden is probably not for you if your space receives less than 4 hours of sun per day. You just kind of want to know that going into it, because it can be a larger investment if you're wanting to scale your business. Consider how the soil and how well it drains. Most cut flowers and plants need well draining soil. This means loose soil with plenty of space for air and water. This makes the roots happy, gives them plenty of room to grow and thrive. So you're not going to get a great return on investment if you have a super compacted area of clay. A lot of times people want to have a space in their yard. Kind of what I think about is like maybe where you park often and you just want to till it up and start planting your flowers there. But if you've been parking in that spot for the last 10 years, it's going to take a lot of work to get you to that point. Not saying that it's not possible, but you just want to go in with a realistic mindset. Like I said, if that's all the space that you have, you can do it, but you might want to think about a raised bed or something like that instead. So the size of your cutting garden will depend on the area that you have available, that gets full or partial sun. And it also depends on how much time you have to dedicate for preparation and maintenance. A larger area obviously requires more time and labor, but my advice to you is start small. Kind of what you think about when cut flowers is like you want to see them from the road. It's so beautiful, but realistically, if you can see your cut flower area or garden from the road, you're probably going to dread taking care of it because it is so much labor and there's not a lot of mechanical equipment that can help you out in that aspect. So start small and then scale up as you need. I have some people in the county that I gave this advice to. I said, start small. And then I drove by and I saw the patch from the road and I was like, oh no, they did not listen to my advice. And I think they have not even planted their plants yet and they're already overwhelmed. So please take my advice, even though I told them that. So building a healthy soil, this is the foundation of your garden or the rock that your garden is going to stand on. If this has cracks, if it has weak spots, kind of like your home, it's going to break down over time and become more prone to diseases and insects and things like that. So some things to look for: healthy soil should be loose, well draining, full of life. You want to see some earthworms in there, organic matter, and then of course have the basic nutrients that plants need. The first thing you can do is just loosen up the soil with a pitchfork or a shovel. Um, don't do this while the soil is wet because that can make compaction worse. That is something that you can do without a tiller, or even if you don't want to go that route, that's just a good way to do it for pretty cheap, and you can get good results from it. So you'll take your soil sample and we can process those through the extension office. If you're not in Pike County, any extension office in the state can do that for you. So most annual flowers, you're looking for a pH of 6.3 to 6.8, but aim for neutral, which is around 7. So thinking of your garden design, the lifeline of a cutting garden is regular harvest. We'll discuss this more later. So start small, so that you'll be able to harvest everything that is opening up at the same time. If everything is open at the same time, you're going to have flowers coming out of your ears, and then all of a sudden, it's like, how many people do I know that I can get rid of these two? Which is a great treat to have, but you got to be realistic. So remember, in this case, you're not planning for aesthetics, you're planning for growth pattern and harvest efficiency. So consider planting in straight rows to make harvesting easier and more efficient for you to get in and out of. If you are looking for aesthetics, you can still do cut flowers, maybe just in a raised bed, or just like a gallon bucket with drain holes in it. You can also incorporate it somehow into your landscape design. So at bed prep, which is, starting with your design, you're going to want to install the stakes and poles and all that kind of stuff, netting, whatever it is, at planting while the plants are small. Because once you get in there, and if you plant sweet peas and they have the little twirly bits on them, it's going to be more frustrating than anything to try and go back and redo that stuff once the plants have already gotten started. There's an example. You don't want to have to go and shove every flower through the grid lines. You can see on the right side, it looks like they started from when the plants were small. So when you're selecting plants, it's kind of like packing for a trip. You want to pack light. You start with 5 plants in shapes and colors that will go together in varying combinations. Start with annuals. That way you only have a 1 year or 1 growing season commitment. So consider color, stem length, and the time of year that these all come together. And that'll get you good and started. So some options for beginners is bachelor's button, coxcomb, coneflowers, cosmos, marigolds, Mexican sunflowers, yarrows, zinnias. These are all great options to get you started. A lot of people just want to get full on into dahlias and peonies and all that kind of stuff, and that is a big commitment. It's a big investment up front. So maybe start with something small, see if you like it and enjoy it, and then, like I said, scale your operation from there. So with maintenance, fertilization is very important in any garden, but especially important in a cut flower garden if you want to get blooms. At planting, you'll apply a well-balanced fertilizer to promote well-rounded growth. In the early vegetative stage, which is about 2 to 4 weeks after planting, you'll apply a nitrogen boosting fertilizer, which is can be like calcium nitrate, blood meal, or a fish emulsion, to encourage strong plants to grow tall and hold up flowers. At bud formation, select a fertilizer for boosting blooms. Typically, it includes a higher ratio of phosphorus and potassium to nitrogen. And all this stuff will be available if you buy it in a bag or if you buy it through a dealership. They should be able to point you in the right direction. But your local extension agent's always happy to help too. So you want to water appropriately for the types of flowers that you're growing and the time of year. If you're growing from seed, you'll want to water daily until germination, about an inch on average after plants are actively growing. I will say daily, if you're starting seeds, you just want to turn on that mist setting that would be on your water hose and just do like that until the soil's wet. You don't want to drown them. So if you're growing hardy annuals, you may not need to water very much over the winter. Consider drip irrigation or soaker hoses on a time for best results. If you can't be, you can't be there all the time, and you shouldn't. So if you're hand watering, when the plants are taller, avoid getting foliage wet and flowers wet to reduce disease pressure. Definitely don't want to be getting the blooms wet. They're going to get wet from rain, which we really need, but try to prevent it as much as you can from something that you can control. So in the book, or in one of the cut flowers book, it says the lifeline of a cutting garden is harvesting all the flowers that are open on a regular schedule, meaning you need to go out and cut regularly and harvest everything that's ready to be flower. Cut flowers are harvested before they're completely ready to preserve base life. If you've ever grown zinnias or you're planning on doing it, right when the bloom comes out, right where the stem and the bloom meet, it's squishy, and once it starts to harden up and it doesn't give in, is how you know it's time to harvest. So there are some good resources out there. I think the book is called I want to give you all the right one. Oh, it's Lisa Ziegler is in Cool Flowers. This is a good reference for you if you wanted to get started. So by harvesting regularly, it signals to the plant to keep producing flowers. If you aren't harvesting to put in vases, you should at least be deadheading. So that signals you cut the blooms off that you can't get to or don't have time to harvest, so that it tells the plant you need to put on more blooms. Harvesting is best done in the morning while it's still cool, before the heat of the day, but after the morning dew has dried off. If you do it later in the day, or that's all you can get to, I would try and do it at dusk, just to kind of get some of the heat of the day off there and immediately put them into water. Biggest thing is regularly scout for pests, weeds, insects, and diseases. This helps get you a jump start on anything that you could see out there. So post-harvest care, researchers have shown that there's a strong inverse relationship between the number of microbes in the water and the longevity of cut flowers. So always harvest into a clean, sanitized bucket. If all you can do is just water and dawn, that's better than nothing. Preferably hot water, let them cool off. So this means with cleaning with soap, rinsing in clean water, and then if you can, sanitize with a bleach solution, and the formula should be on that bleach bottle and left to dry. So you harvest those flowers directly into water for the best results, and water should be clean and cold. Kind of the rule of thumb, just always put fresh water in there. That's going to help you in the long run. The depth in the water bucket should be deep enough to cover the bottom of the stems, usually 1 to 6 inches. Depending on the time of day that you cut them, if you had to cut them in the afternoon, they might soak up more water. So you just want to make sure there's plenty in there before you store them. Your tools should be sharp and cleaned and sanitized after the last use to prevent spreading disease or damaging stems. When I was at ABAC, I had a teacher that she swore by putting a little bit of Listerine in a tiny little like amber spray bottle, and she would keep it in her halter with her snips on it, and she would just spray a little bit of Listerine on there in between flowers. She swore that helped her And she's been doing it for a long time, so I believe it. So you want to strip all the leaves off that will be in the water. That's going to keep, more bacteria in there if you leave them on there, and they'll decay over time and increase bacteria growth. Never lay flowers on the ground or on a dirty surface, just because those blooms are so delicate. If you're not planning on arranging right away, make sure your flowers stay cool by bringing buckets inside, in the garage, or refrigerate if possible. Refrigeration is interesting because that is how a lot of our commercial flowers get here that you see in the grocery store. But I think this is an area that locally grown flowers can come in, because like zinnias, they can't tolerate refrigeration. So therefore, that's probably why you don't see them a lot in the grocery stores, because they can't be shipped. But this is kind of a gap in that market that I think local flowers can meet. So if you're harvesting multiple buckets worth of flowers, make sure you move each bucket inside or into the shade before harvesting the next one. Keeping flowers cool is critical for vase life, and that's what, if you're selling these at the end of the day, that's what's going to keep your customers coming back. So before you're arranging, you want to recut your stems, but just keep minimally handling the flowers to avoid bruising and damaging them. Mechanical damage to the leaves and flowers reduces the aesthetic value of the flowers, and bruised petals are more prone to, bacteria starting and disease infection. So the quality of cut flowers is the best when maintained with gentle and minimal handling. Holding solutions, or base solutions sometimes called, flower food can be helpful in extending base life. They usually have some sort of combination or biocide and carbohydrate. A lot of people will swear by their own mixes. Just do whatever works for you. Different products are formulated differently. Some for hard water. So if you have hard water, I would look for that. Some more for general purpose. And they will have different concentrations of ingredients. And like I said, some people swear by them, some people don't. I think the best thing that you can do is just have cool and clean water. So moving into basic floral design, you've planted your garden, you have all these blooms, and now what the heck do you do with them? So designing flowers, I like this quote, designing with flowers is similar to learning how to play a musical instrument or draw a landscape. It takes time and practice to achieve these principles of floral design, but it's so fun to do and work with, and just play with them. The vase or container that you select should be proportional to your arrangement, and the color and texture of your vase should complement your flowers and not compete with them. It can be a dedicated container like a glass vase, or it could be something you find around your house, like a coffee can or a mason jar. You want to have a variety of flowers, and hopefully you will, because you picked those 5 that I started the presentation with. But you'll also need to add greenery or greens. This adds contrast to your arrangement and creates physical scaffolding, and you can grow greens in your cutting garden or forage for them around the yard. Sometimes forage for them in public places, but be careful doing that. So the rule of 3, our brains like odd numbers, and it looks more natural when we look at something from an aesthetic perspective. So in general, group your flowers by 3, 5s, or 7s, whether that's number of stems, number of color, or number of heights. Just kind of keep it simple. Imagine there's a scale under your arrangement when you're doing it, and wherever you place a flower stem, you kind of want to balance on the other side, whether it's top, bottom, or side to side. Also, when you're arranging flowers, think about balance when it comes into your color scheme. Remember the color wheel. You might have to dig way back in your brain to remember that, but that's going to be your friend when you're selecting your arrangements. So you could do something like monochromatic, which would all be the same colors, just different shades and tints. You could do 2 to 4 colors that are adjacent on the color wheel. And you could do complementary colors, which are colors that are opposite of one another on the color wheel. So just always be thinking of that kind of thing when you're going into it. But these are just light rules. You have fun with it and enjoy it. That's the biggest thing. So there are 5 elements into basic arrangement. So the first element with your foliage and green, so saying you have your base, if you want to use floral tape or you have one of those heavyweight floral frogs, I always love finding those at estate sales or thrift stores because they don't make them like that anymore. And you can really turn anything into a vase or something if you have one of those. So you're going to place the greenery around the base, and you can have some draping over. This is kind of like the foundation for your arrangements. The stems are physically creating a scaffolding or matrix to support your flowers that you've worked so hard on. So you want to maybe find something that's a little bit more woody that will hold up. See, so our next element is called a line flower. That is a flower that is line or spike shape that gives us some height in your arrangement. So we're putting the line flower next because it kind of give you that overall shape and max the height of your design. So this is kind of where you can play with that balance. How can you push things up to the side, to the top? So then next you're going to go in with your focal flower. This might be one of your biggest or your showiest flowers. This is sometimes considered like the diva of your arrangement if it doesn't need to be a complex flower or a very expensive one. Just attention grabbing. Some ones that I like to use are the cactus zinnias. Is just a type of variety. They just have like curly, almost curly crinkled petals on them, and they're just different than you normally see. They really grab your attention. But zinnias are easy and pretty cheap, not cheap, but they're on the cheaper side in cut flowers. So you put those in. Once you put your focal flower in, then it's kind of starting to fill your arrangement. So you use your filler flowers. This can be something like bachelor buttons, and these are your little flowers that fill the gaps in the space in your arrangement. This is where you want to add some texture and color. They're typically pretty small, delicate, and compound blooms. So lastly, our secondary flowers. These are not as big and as showy as your focal flower, but they're not as small or compact as your filler flower either. So they continue to add color and texture and interest into our arrangement. And you can put anywhere from 1 to a few secondary flowers. So this just kind of makes you have a well-rounded arrangement. And I know this is a lot of information in just a short period of time, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or you want me to go a little bit more in depth on something, I'm happy to answer those questions. And I appreciate Brooklyn for letting me speak on cut flowers today. And I wish I could be, we could do this all in person because it's so hard to talk about cut flowers and arrangement and stuff when I can't show you with my hands. But I hope that you learned something, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Macie. Before I pause the recording, I do want to get you to answer a couple questions for us.
Okay.
As far as the flowers that you recommended for beginners, are all of those going to be seeded? And if so, do you have recommendations on where they can find those, or were some of those bulbs?
Yes, so that is kind of a tricky question. Most of the time you can find all this stuff like at Lowe's or Home Depot or your local like feed and seed store. Whenever you're getting more into the specialty flowers, you're gonna have like your bulbs and stuff like that. There is a lot of resources online. One that I specifically love is her name is Florette, and she sells a lot of great ones. But she is based out of Washington, not Washington, D.C., the other Washington. So trying to recommend those in Georgia is difficult. So you definitely, there's just not a lot of resources for us and flower varieties that are specifically made for Georgia. I hope we will eventually get there. But I think just be careful and read the seed package and make sure it's for the correct zone. Um, I think my number one recommendation would probably be to try and start, if you are starting your own from seed, start them in a tray. Don't start directly in the ground. This is just going to give you, you're going to get to baby them a little bit more before you transition them into the ground, um, into your prepared soil bed. So, yes, a little, it's a difficult, that's an interesting one to do. I think a lot of people probably that grow cut flowers save their own seeds just because um it's worked for them in the past and they want to be able to do it next year. But yes, I hope that answered your question enough.
That was perfect. And I do know that we have our seed saving presentation. So if you're questioning how we go from having a cut flower garden this year to seed saving, hopefully we can help y'all with that as well.